You know when you get to one of those sections in the Bible where it's just like a really long list of names and it just goes on and on and on with just a list of people's strange names that you can't really pronounce? Well, I'm sure when you get to those pages, you do what I do and you skip them and you get to a part that actually makes sense to you. And you think, that's strange. Like, I thought the Bible was supposed to be helpful. Why is there just this long list? What does that have anything to do with me? Well, I actually want to point you to one of those sections in the Bible today, and that's Matthew 1. Matthew 1 is the very beginning, it's the very first chapter in the New Testament, and the book of Matthew covers the story of Jesus and who he was and what he came to do. And the book of Matthew in chapter 1 opens with a genealogy. That's a long list of names. Now, oftentimes, we think of ourselves as like individual people. When you think of like, who am I? You just think of yourself as you are as an individual. But in this time, when Jesus was alive, they thought of themselves as connected to their lineage or their family. They saw themselves as their past, as where they came from, as their family. And so genealogies were really important because who your family was in your past was who you were today. So we actually can learn something about who Jesus was by studying his genealogy. So I just want to point you to the first verse in Matthew 1. Matthew 1:1 opens like this. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole genealogy. You can do that on your own after you watch this video. But I want to point you to just a few things that show us a little bit about who Jesus is. Now, what this genealogy is doing is it's connecting him to the grand narrative of God, the grand story of God about how God has worked in the world through his people for thousands of years. It's saying what God was doing all the way back then is now reaching its fulfillment or its climax or the most important moment in the coming of Jesus. And so it opens by saying, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Now, I'm sure you may know this by now, but Christ was not Jesus' last name. Christ was a title to designate who he was. Christ was a word that meant God's anointed one, or as it was often thought of, the Messiah. The Messiah was a long-awaited figure in the people of Israel who would come and rescue them and deliver them out of slavery and bondage and into life with God. He's saying that long-awaited figure that you've thought of for thousands of years is now here in the arrival of this person, Jesus. And then he's called the Son of David. David was the great king of Israel. He was a man after God's own heart. And God had promised him that someone, one of his descendants, would reign on the throne of the people of God forever. And so by identifying Jesus with David, he's saying he is this long-awaited king who will reign and rule in God's good will on earth as it is in heaven from now until eternity. Jesus came to do that. And then lastly, he's called the son of Abraham. Abraham was the first person that God had called out to be part of his great rescue plan. He was the beginning of the family of God. And God had made a very special promise to Abraham that he said that he would bless him and that through him, all the nations, not just the Jewish people, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. And so God is saying that blessing to all people has come now in the person of Jesus. And actually, we are recipients of that blessing. We are the nations that God has sent his rule and his reign and his blessing to. And so this week, as we get closer to Christmas and we get closer to that day where we remember the birth of Jesus and that whole story, I want you to think this. I am connected to a greater story. I am connected to the people of God and the family of God, and a plan that God has thought of for thousands of years has been made available to me through this person in Jesus. And all of God's promises are proven true in the coming of this person, Jesus. So spend some time and consider what that could mean for your, not only how you think of your past, but what you think of your future, that your future is secure in the family of God.